So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, thank you. So this has been a bit of fun. Obviously, having a conference room for 2,000 people and then breaking it down into 2 smaller rooms is a little bit harder than we thought it was going to be. So thank you for bearing with us. And do we have a treat for you? Now, my kind of chief responsibility at Petrochemical Update is to really kind of research and go into the capital project space. And we're not just dealing with mega projects here, we're dealing with small cap, we're doing mid cap, we're doing integrations and turnarounds as well. And my job on a daily basis is to call up executives in the owner-operator community, the EPC and the vendors, to try and understand, what are your top challenges? What are you really struggling with? Where do you need help? Where do you need advice? Where would working with your peers help? Now, as a result of that, we came up with a couple of key industry themes that we'd like to address today. And it seemed to be the most sensible thing is to get a couple of the most senior and wonderful people in the capital project space together to try and answer some of those questions for you. So I'd like you to help me in introducing our moderator for this morning session, who's going to be Ed Lehotsky. He's formerly the SVP of Engineering Construction from Cheniere Energy, and he's now currently a executive advisor for them, and he's going to be moderating our panel for today. So if you can give me a big round of applause for Ed Lehotsky and the big panel. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, am I live now?
Say what? Okay, wrong place. Appreciate you guys doing this a little bit differently than what we usually do. I'm the moderator. This is the first time I've ever moderated one of these things, so I'm not going to do it. And instead, what we're going to do is let the panel chime in whenever they feel they can add something. And I'm sure all of these fine people can add something to all of the subjects we have on the list to do. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more. As already been said, Kerr said that I worked for Cheniere Energy for the last about 16 years there. Before that, I worked 25 years with KBR, doing pretty much the same thing I did for Cheniere, except on the other side as a contractor building LNG plants. So I will talk both to the owner side and occasionally to the help Ann out with the contractor side. So now I'm going to let, starting with DC, introduce themselves.
Okay, good. My name's DC Otan. I'm the Vice President of Central Project Management with ExxonMobil's Global Projects Company that was just formed April 1. My background, I've been with ExxonMobil since 1980, and all of it has been in the upstream until I joined the Global Projects Company. So my last big project was the Papua New Guinea LNG project. I was the project executive. And that started up in 2014. So part of what I am trying to learn these days is what's going on in the downstream and how are downstream projects different. So, so that's part of what I'll be listening for in this panel.
Okay, Jay.
Good. Jim Ellis with SABIC, probably a little known company that's the 3rd largest chemical company in the world. I'm sure many of you don't know that. I'm the VP GM for global projects with responsibility for all projects outside of Saudi Arabia. I've been there since 2013, and prior to that I spent 35 years with the DuPont company in various manufacturing roles as well as engineering roles. I'm also the current president of Construction Users Roundtable.
Yep, my name is Lance Medlin. I'm the CPO, Chief Projects Officer, and COO of Meridian Energy Group. We are the owners and developers of the Davis Refinery in North Dakota, as well as the Walton Station Refinery in West Texas. My pedigree also is ExxonMobil, where I'm sure Desi and I can both say we think we're the 2 smartest people in the room, but she probably is. Prior to that, with Shell, International Exploration and Production, so the CapEx side of Shell Project Group, and then KBR before that, where I quickly learned it was too hard to do real work, so I had to work for the owner and eventually become one. So, thank you.
So I'm Ann Esbeck. I'm the Manager of Innovation for the Oil, Gas, and Chemicals Global Business Unit at Bechtel. I've been with Bechtel for about 6 years, executing EPC projects. And before that, I was at NASA for 8 years as a Mission Control Spaceflight Operations Officer.
Okay, thank you. Just like the last session, and I think everybody on this stage, as well as everybody back there, put safety first. And so that's going to be the first subject we're going to talk about. So what the panel is going to talk about is what's our current view on tackling safety, both in the U.S. Gulf Coast and in globally. I just want to make one point here, again, with my experience. Most of my experience has been overseas, and it's very interesting what I found out when I came back here and started working with Cheniere, is that the American worker doesn't have as good a safety record as many third world countries. And why is that? And what can we do, of course, to fix that? So I'm going to ask the panel here, maybe start off with DC. What is being done well, and where can we still improve?
Okay, so what I'll do is talk a little bit about our safety journey. It started, of course, with compliance. I think we all started there. Then moved through behavioral work, behavioral safety. And then we are moving to something that we're calling human performance. And so it is around safe choice is the term that we've used. And it's really around making sure that the worker is understanding when they're making critical decisions. So we all make thousands of decisions every day. You know, get in my car and you catch yourself being on automatic, right? Well, you've made a lot of decisions. But which of those decisions are the few hundred that are the most critical and will keep you safe? And so we are educating and working with our EPC contractors as well as the craft, and helping them focus on safe choice. How are they making safe choices, and how do they know that they're making safe choices? We did that in Hebron. We're working that with GCGB. We've got about 7 of our big projects using safe choice. We're using it in operations. So that's where we're going directionally. But back to Ed's point about globally, it does depend on the maturity of the workforce as to whether or not and how you use safe choice. So I'll go back to Papua New Guinea, where we had a workforce of about 20,000 people. Well, half of those folks were Papua New Guineans. These were subsistence farmers and subsistence fishermen before they came to work for us. And so we had to go back to compliance because they had to learn. Not that they couldn't learn, but they just had to learn, and compliance was the best way for them, that we found for them to learn. But then we paired them up with, we identified the key leaders, the natural leaders in the work groups, and we gave them some special training, and we called them safety champions, and we sent them back. Your job is still whatever your job was. If you're a rigger, you're still a rigger, but you're a safety champion, and your job is to help your peers understand what's safe. So we use a variety of tools depending on the maturity of the workforce that we've got.
Yeah, and we've done something very similar, but actually taken it to a school. So at any of our oil, gas, and chemical projects that we've got around the world, we actually have a safety hazard school that we have there. We've actually moved it forward through our innovation program and turned it into our mobile safety hazard school. So that on day one, when you arrive at site, there's already a safety school there to help you teach how to make those decisions, right? And teach about what those decisions' impact are. But then beyond that, rather than just having that hands-on training facility where you can actually check out and actually try out all the tools before you use them, you actually do a checkout before you leave. So we know that when you've left the safety hazard school, you are qualified to go do the job that you're being asked to do on job, and we're doing it in a safe environment. And then we're looking at now including into or venturing into the virtual reality environment. So how do you go and put people into unsafe environments where they need to be able to make those decisions very quickly? and be able to make them in a very safe way, but being able to put them in that experience before they get there, right? If they've had that experience before they actually get into an unsafe environment, they're going to be able to rely on that experiential learning they had in the safety hazard school.
I'd like to build on the Safe Toys process as well, being part of GCGV. And the other value proposition was that we invited families to come in. And, you know, safety is a value. And if we can make sure that those that are out there at the interface of the work day in and day out, and they're thinking about those that are important to them, which are our children and our families, and we give those families an experiential opportunity to go through a process like that, you know, and you come home from work and, you know, Daddy, did you work safe today? That means something, guys, because it's all about, you know, setting a culture of safety, building the value of safety. And I think, you know, this whole concept that we've deployed at GCGV is actually quite good. It's sending the right cultural messages.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your patience.
I'd like to build off of one other point, maybe change the top about safety, because first of all, this morning, I was really impressed with the leadership in the meeting that talked about safety, but all of it was about workplace safety. I want to remind the room that the other opportunity we have is on process safety. We don't talk about that enough. Process safety, culture, and we set projects up for making sure we can operate them successfully in the very, very early phases of front-end loading the project. I think we've let a lot of that erode. Some of the competency that we talked about that's kind of shifting in our industry, both on the owner side as well as on the contractor side, is creating real opportunities to create focus on process safety for us. And we all know the consequences of this. It's important, obviously, if any individual gets hurt. But imagine any of us in this room having an incident where our brand reputation is put at risk, and all of us are at, you know, looking for a job or for another company to work. So I think the process safety element is also something we've paid a lot of attention to GCGV and other projects that SABIC's working on around the globe.
And I think it's one of those things you can actually design out of the system from the beginning. If we can eliminate the risk from the beginning, that's really the best way to go and address your safety, right? If the risk doesn't exist, then I can't have a safety incident around it. And so there are a lot of things that are going on within the industry now where we can actually leverage a lot of the data information that we had in the past and start utilizing advanced analytics, being able to use artificial intelligence to influence the design, right? So that we have very constructible systems, but then when it turns into operations, that they're incredibly safe for operations as well.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to, so you're absolutely right. I wanted to go back to the statistic that you mentioned where domestic workers in the U.S. have are less successful at being safe in the work site than some of the other developing countries that we've been to. And it makes me, it comes back to something that we're trying to do at Meridian and something that we've learned along the way with everyone we've worked with, both owner and contractor, is weighing the risk itself. So in the U.S., we have a starting point where we think we've got skilled laborers, they're 20 years in, they're skilled, they've got experience. So our training effort to them is a little bit different than it might be if we were going into Indonesia or PNG and we were starting with someone who was not familiar with the energy industry at all. We'd go through a much more robust training program. And in that developing country, they'll weigh the risk a lot differently than someone who does it every day. If you were to bring a 10-ton crane into somewhere they had never seen a crane, they might take heavy lifts a bit more caution than we do, in Baytown or Deer Park, where there's 10 of them on every block. Now, we recognize the risk, but do we weigh it correctly? We haven't gone completely away from saying safety first at Meridian, but we're coming close to it. We're taking on more of an approach of safety equal along the philosophy of if safety were first, we probably just simply wouldn't do most of the activities that we do, but we can do them with a safety equal attitude.
Good. And you mentioned virtual reality. Can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, you put somebody in an unsafe situation. Are you talking about the guy's on top of a ladder and he falls off, or what happens?
So we have several different training programs that we actually utilize virtual reality in. One is in a partnership with ITI, where we actually can train our crane operators, whether they're here in the U.S. or abroad, especially when we're trying to upskill a population that we're moving into. We can actually train on how to operate a crane in virtual reality and then check out and certify that they're a valid crane operator from that standpoint, improving our safety. So before ever getting into a large piece of equipment, certifying that you know how to use it so you're not putting yourself at risk, others at risk, or the equipment itself at risk. Some of the others is working at heights is one of my most fun ones personally. We actually have where you can walk across a beam at height without being tied off. I will tell you, everybody falls. And when they do, their body reacts just like they were going to fall in reality. So again, giving that experience to someone where they're in a completely safe environment, we're monitoring them, we're making sure they're not going to fall and actually hurt themselves in the virtual reality environment, but it sticks with you. You've had that feeling of falling from heights, from climbing a ladder and falling, or walking a beam and falling, those sort of things. We do have fire safety as well, so being able to go and figure out, can you react and pick the proper fire extinguisher, go and actually put out that fire on the site. So lots of different things and lots of opportunities in that space to leverage something that, again, sounds like it shouldn't fit into the EPC space or into operations space because it basically came from video games. That's part of what my job is to go find those things in other industries that we can leverage to make ourselves better and provide more value.
You know, one thing, again, as both a contractor and an owner in my life, where I think we had been falling behind, failing as far as safety, is the communication between the owner and the contractor. I know that when we've had accidents on the job sites that I've been working on recently, a lot of the times the contractor or some people in the contractor side will try to close off, you know, not communicate with the owner, just what happened. Sorry about that. Not try to, you know, work together to figure out how we can prevent it as a team rather than as contractor versus owner.
So let's give a big hand to
it was
Richard.
great to hear some of the CEOs just a few minutes ago say that transparency has to happen.
He is a vice
transparency has to be between the owner, the contractor, and the workers. The workers have to fully understand that it's their responsibility to be safe and to make sure that the guys next to them safe, and to not be afraid to tell their boss and that boss to tell the owner that we can do this better. So I think transparency would be something that I would like to see a lot more of.
All right, and the last but not the least is Randy Pound here. He's the Global Director of Maintenance and Reliability for Olin Chemicals.
Pulling for the same
And
thing. The goal is the same. And the more
originally from Illinois, he's a resident of Houston. He's a big tennis fan. And under his direction, in that role, there are 74 plants and 24 sites. So he has done a lot of traveling to keep up with them. So
and just building on that, I think we have a commitment in SABIC where any individual, no matter where they are on the job, can shut the job down.
So we'll start with
if it's not safe, it's not safe. We really have to make sure that we empower the people, no matter who they are. Coming on our site, they see something through a clean set of eyes. This just doesn't feel right. Stopping the job is something we expect them to do. And that's worked out quite well. The other point I'd like to build on is we're always looking for those things that are not right. I think we reinforce the behaviors when we look for what's right. We don't do that enough. Taking time to not only stop a contractor in the field that's doing something right and having a conversation that reinforces those behaviors really builds the kind of environment you want to have and the kind of culture you want to have of recognizing safety as a value. If we see it wrong, people will start to hide it. It'll go underground. I see that all the time in China. Spent about 10 years in China. The safety performance in China for me is a little different than your ed. It wasn't all that great. And it was the hands and pocket syndrome. And you got to watch that. So how do you change it? You change it through the positive reinforcement process. And we've had some really good look in fortune to go a very long time without an injury in SABIC, 260 million man-hours without a lost workday case, and it's because we've reinforced those kinds of positive behaviors in the workplace.
Okay, I'd like to move on to another subject because I know we can talk about this
We could go on for another
hours and hours, and it's a good thing that we would. But again, the title to this particular panel is Planning for a New Era of Capital Project Sustainability. And by sustainability, what we mean is, can we continue to build these big projects, mega projects, or even some of the smaller construction projects? Again, one of the surprises I had when I started working for Cheniere is productivity of the workforce and availability of the workforce just wasn't what I expected. It used to be the U.S. Gulf Coast was, the gold standard. When you measured productivity, it was some multiple of U.S. Gulf Coast because we were the best, because we had the most people. There was never any issue with that. And that's all changed over the last, I don't know how many years. So what can we do to get our workforce motivated, get our workforce trained, get our workforce continuing to work on this? Again, construction is not a very sexy job. It's hot, it's sweaty, you gotta hang, on ladders safely and weld upside down, things like that. People don't want to do that. They'd rather sit in an air-conditioned office in their pajamas and code. So how do we get the workforce trained? Now, again, as an owner, one of the things that Cheniere started was working with Bechtel, who's our contractor on the Sabine project, and having training for high school graduates, for trade school graduates, and for retiring or returning servicemen, trying to get them just to learn how to weld, because we had a real shortage of welders. So Cheniere paid for this, some of it, and Bechtel also chipped in to do that. So that's just one example I can come up with is how we can develop the workforce from the beginning and get them hopefully to continue to help us build out these projects and build out our economy. Can somebody add to that?
We looked at that as well, and we're working with the University of North Dakota.
Guess what happened?
The project did get its commission and started. Welding programs,
how long that
in the development skilled workforce, but the reality of it is, whatever caused the depletion of resources in the Gulf Coast will also cause the depletion of any workforce that you develop anywhere. There are better paying jobs somewhere else. People caught on to the Gulf Coast norms. They said, well, let's just get those people, an extra 20-30% of your salary is a big deal. And I disagree. I would rather be working out in the yard than in my PJs coat. And my wife would much rather I be working out in the yard. For us, it's a big cycle. It all ties into, it goes back to safety, it goes into the construction practice, it goes into the family dynamic that you put together. People normally won't leave and take expat rotational status. I worked in Indonesia and Korea on family status for a long time, but I wanted my wife and children with me.
So with that said,
Meridian's approach to some of the countering some of the norms of productivity factors in North Dakota
my first
or
question
West Texas is to take a modular approach to almost every single thing we do, not just mechanical modularization, but electrical instrumentation as well. If I can have a complete kit with home runs pulled, instrumentation already emceed at the fab yard, so I can just plug it in and I transfer all those man hours to the Gulf Coast, where I'm developing that skill set, where the worker's going home to the husband or the wife or the family. That's 2 out of 3. The other thing is if I'm putting in the construction work packs, so that ties back to safety as well. If I've got can you imagine in a hydrocarbon live environment what type of control procedures there are to go out and just change any work activity, any man area you do. We take that same, and in capital projects, we hate working off of operations permit to work systems because they're rigorous, they're normally not discipline specific, they're hard, they don't really fit with us. But they're also, they require a lot more review and it takes longer. If somewhere between that and more rapid construction in a greenfield environment is the right amount of review, the right amount of detail, level 5 construction work pack, all the way from the very beginning. Now, if that level of detail is included from basically the feed, if you're putting work packs together and feed all the way through FEL 3 into the beginning of phase 4, you're going to develop a training program for the worker. With that training program comes safety, becomes skilled workers, they become higher demand, they're working in modular fab yards, they're staying on the Gulf Coast. Of course there's attrition, but you're creating an environment specific to the Gulf Coast where you've just got a repeating workforce coming on onto new projects. Is it sustainable? Not really, because unfortunately we've got more money coming into CapEx than we could possibly just train domestic resources. That's why we have the infusion of expats coming here as well.
I think
Randy,
part of it too
what's your
is
experience
that
with
early
Olin,
engagement as well. So there's a lot of
making sure,
pressure right now, especially on families and on
incorporated
students
this
as they're coming
concept
out,
in
that
your
they need to go to a
project
four-year
management
college.
process?
Right, and that
Well, I
four-year
would have
college is the
similar
way to
comments.
go,
One
and
of
that's
the
the way to
things that's
succeed in
important
life.
for everyone to
And so I
be
think
aware
one
of
of the
is
things
in
we're looking at is
October
how
of
you get early engagement
2015,
and show people
Olin
that there are
Corporation
other alternatives.
nearly
One of the great
quadrupled
things
its
that
size.
we've done is
And
actually
so
take our
when you
VR
quadruple a
simulators
company's size,
to a lot of
we're
engagement
bringing two different
opportunities at
cultures
middle
together.
schools, at
We
junior
bought a large
highs,
piece of
things
Dow
like that,
Chemical
and actually
Company
show that,
and
hey,
joined that
you
with
can
what we call
basically
Heritage
play a
Olin.
video game
So we're still in the process of
and get paid to
optimizing,
do
so I
it.
don't want to
right? And
make
so
everyone think that
especially
we're perfect
capturing
already.
kids at that age,
But
going,
in our
there are
capital
other
project area, we
alternatives
do
where you can actually
recognize
be really
that
successful, have
we
a
need
really
to do
great
everything possible
and
to tear
fulfilling
down any sort of
job and
barriers that
lifestyle
exist between the capital,
without going to a
engineering
four-year
groups,
college, and then
and our
getting them
maintenance and
engaged at
reliability,
that
and
point
of course
and
our
partnering,
operating
as you
groups
said,
too.
with some of the high
Because
schools and things like that and
for
trade
those of you
schools.
who are in the plenary
So you get
session this
people,
morning, you heard
you have to get them
some
early.
CEOs and
I
COOs
think
and
for
presidents
the rule for
talking
girls
about the
was
life
you have to
cycle
get
of a
them by age
capital
13,
project, and if you
or they've
notice,
already made the decision
their
to go somewhere
comments
else.
stopped at
And so
commissioning.
those are the sort of things
So
where,
in their mind, the
especially
life
if we're looking
cycle
at
of
a
a capital
declining
project
workforce
ends at commissioning.
overall,
Well,
is we
in
need
our
to be starting
company, that's
early
not
and
the
trying
case.
to train that
For,
workforce
for people who are in
to
maintenance and
convince them to come
reliability
and
and
join construction, because
operations,
you're right, it's hot
the
and
life
it's
cycle of
sweaty
that asset is
everybody
really
likes
just
to go
getting
out there,
started
but
when
it's fun.
commissioning is completed.
So for us,
we're taking a
workforce
much more
development is a
holistic approach.
C-suite
We also have a
issue.
stage gate process that
in
we
the
use
spirit
for
of
our capital
transparency,
projects that leads us
we have a
through
crisis.
a long list of deliverables along
If
along
we
the
take a
life
look
cycle
at
of
the
capital
infrastructure
project, and I won't
that's going to go on in the
detail
U.S.,
about
it's
that.
upwards of about $1
And then
billion
organizationally,
over the
Mike
next 10
Fuchek, if
years.
you raise your hand out here, Mike.
And if you take a
he
look
reports
then
directly to me,
at
and he's our
the
global
skilled
manager
workforce
of
to
capital
support that,
projects, but he reports to the
we're
global
2 to 3
director of
million
maintenance and reliability.
craft skilled
So
workers
you have to
short
think about
in
that,
the
the job
U.S.
title and the
50%
role.
of that's the
What
Gulf
Mike's role
Coast.
is to make sure that
So
modern,
why I say that's a
effective
C-suite
maintenance and
issue
reliability
is
practices
it's not
are
going to
built
change
into every
because it hasn't
capital
changed to
project that we
date.
do.
And we're suffering.
we're-
So what's our
we have
strategies? We do go to
74
modularization,
chemical
right? So
manufacturing plants
we
around the
embed
world. So Mike has a
modularization
huge
techniques,
job.
and
He's
I
doing
think
a great
Semic
job
talked
with
about
it,
it this
and we'll
morning.
continue to
On
mature in that area.
GCGV,
But
we're
I
upwards
think
of
the key
80 to
difference with Olin is
90%.
we
Why?
consider a capital project to be much
Labor
more holistic than
availability,
just
labor
saying you're done
productivity,
when
skilled labor
commissioning is
availability.
So Randy,
And that's going to be the predominant strategy for us. And we look at the business case of this, right, to push modularization off to China.
right.
That in and of itself is not sustainable.
That's good. All right,
Because unless you
Ken,
step
can
up to the
share some
workforce
of your
issues, if
thoughts?
all of
Do
us
you have a
push this
process,
infrastructure and major mega projects off to Asia, it's only a matter of time before that also becomes a critical issue in terms of resource availability and quality.
Richard and Randy.
So we have to step up this at
I realize
a
that
national level and start to drive
Our
it.
journey, our companies,
In turn, drive it also, in our opinion, from a grassroots standpoint. So on GCGV,
but
20 scholarships
have
given to
in
Del
our
Mar
capital project
College, a
management
technical
process,
college, working with the
integrated
local high
team
schools
for liability
on a
and maintenance
grassroots basis to
input
have process
early on
technology,
in the
welding
process.
technology, instrumental
We are currently
electrical.
working on
All 3
some things
public high schools
like
in the
Randy
area of
Pitcher
Corpus
talked about,
Christi
some
collaborate
practices that
together
will
with the local
improve
technical
that
schools to
integration
ensure that those programs are in place. And oh, by the way,
the deliverables
the
aren't
students
very
at the
well
high school
defined.
get credit for it.
We're working
So
on
it reinforces that, and we get something good because we get to give them the scholarships
that'll
and see
be
the success of them coming in to
beneficial.
our industry and doing
But
well.
really,
So
it's all about the
it's a big
team,
issue,
getting the right
Ed, that
members
we're trying to
involved early
resolve
on
here,
in
that
the
it's not going to happen overnight, but clearly an imperative so the C-suite
Thanks,
to
guys.
step up to.
Yeah, I
One
would
thing,
agree with
if
that,
my memory
building off
goes
of
well,
what
in,
all of you
in
have
projects,
said,
the
that
scope is
anytime you're
defined through a
overseas,
document like
same
project
issue.
design basis document.
When we were
which
in
defines the
PNG, we
premise
ended
for the
up
projects
building
and all that.
to
So when does this other
training centers,
reliability and
one
maintenance
down in
people
Fort
get
Worth
involved
and one up in the
and make
Highlands
sure
to
their
train
thought process
the
for
folks,
reliability and maintenance
to
is
work on the project.
when do they get involved and
and
make sure that
Those schools are
those
still
elements are
ongoing, and
incorporated
as we
in
go
the
back
design,
and look at PNG
in
expansion.
the project design basis document?
We've
Or
got some
does it,
places to
do you
start
do
building
that, or
from.
is it
So
something
that,
needed
the
to be
issue
done?
is more than just on
So
the
I'll
Gulf
ask
Coast.
with you, Randy.
But I
Sure.
would also
Yeah,
make
and Owen,
the
I
comment
mentioned
that,
briefly that we follow a front-end loading
and I think,
process.
Lance,
And you
hit
can
on
Google
this.
front-end loading, and you can get a pretty good
It's not
education
just
on what
work
that
on
is. But we have
productivity that's
customized it for
We have
Owen
to
to
have
be
the
effective
workforce, and we
worldwide
have to
for
have
us. But
worker
we essentially have
productivity.
5
But
stages
it's
in
to
a
your
capital
point.
project, and
We've got to
we
be
call
sure
those
that the
stages
engineering's
FEL,
right,
front-end loading,
and that
FEL
we're
1, 2, 3,
engineering
4,
in
and 5.
sequence, so it's
And
got to be
in
in the
FEL
right
1,
order. And then you've
that's
got to
when
be
we
sure
focus on
the
developing the
procurement
business
is
case
done,
for a
and
capital project.
all of that
FEL
has to
2,
feed the
assuming
site.
assuming
And a
you
lot of our
successfully pass
productivity
FEL 1.
issues are
But
not
FEL 2 is
just
where
with
we
the
evaluate
labor
alternatives.
force,
And when we're
but
starting
also
to
with
evaluate
our
alternatives for capital project, we start bringing our
getting the
maintenance and
engineering and the
reliability
procurement,
expertise into that.
to feed
And
the
then if you
contract.
successfully
So we've
pass
gotta work it
front-end
out
loading
all
stage 2, you move into FEL 3, which is
Jim,
detailed engineering. And so definitely maintenance and reliability
you
are
talked about
very
a
heavily
lot of
involved in detailed
programs that were
engineering.
being
FEL
put in
4
place for skilled
is
laborers, and
completing
also
your detailed
kind of the
engineering
workforce
and
depletion
starting up
if we were to move all the module fabrication in China, et
executing the
cetera.
project.
So what happened in
And
the
then
Gulf
FEL
Coast
5 is startup and commissioning.
was about
So
10
really,
years
we bring
after
in our
what happened
maintenance
in
and
South
reliability
Korea. If
expertise
you're
in
familiar with
FEL
the markets
2,
there,
very
it
heavily
was a
engaged in
massive
FEL
influx.
3
It was a massive
going
influx
forward,
of
all the way to FEL
capex and
5
work
if
hours
needed, but it's mainly
being put
FEL 2
into
and 3
Daewoo's,
where our maintenance
Hyundai,
and
and
reliability input
Samsung,
occurs.
So I guess
especially
it depends on the
Guangxi
size
Island,
of the
where
project,
two
but as
major
maintenance and
Korean
reliability
fabricators
people have a full-time
exhausted
reps
the
on the
workforce.
team,
It
or
became an
is it
influx of less
get
skilled
called in
workforce.
whenever
Post-contract
the need is
awards,
for them to
and a lot of
review
these
some
are lump sum
drawings or
turnkey type
concepts?
contracts
I would
where
say
the
at Olin,
contractor
our
was not put in
projects
a
would
position
fit more
that
into the
they didn't have any
mid-sized
recourse
projects
to come
compared to
back
some
and
of
say,
the other
okay, well,
corporations
we're having
represented
our
here.
own
So
issues.
our maintenance and
And that's some of
reliability
the
input is usually not on
relationship
a
as
full-time
well,
basis.
is
It's
that
as needed,
owners, so
but as much as
it's a few
needed.
different levels. Number one, it's
wanna do
great
the
that we're
projects
putting,
correctly.
we're supporting
Well,
some
Richard,
welding
can you
schools,
share your Dow
some other
experience on
skills,
that?
Yeah, I think
different type of
most major
electricians, et
companies,
cetera.
we have a similar
I
FEL
hear
1
that
through
unanimously
FEL 5,
from
so same stages.
everyone on the board as
You know,
well.
what I will say,
That's
and
not going to
the
get it
folks
done.
that are here that used to work for Dow
shooting
will all
BB
say,
guns,
we don't get maintenance involved in capital projects
at a
early
Death
enough.
Star.
Many of the
Massive thing
actual
coming at
maintenance
us.
and reliability
It
decisions
takes
are made
political influence.
really
We've got to be
before the maintenance rep
lobbying
gets on board.
our
So that's one of the things
politicians
that I've been
for
trying to do is at what stage
government-sponsored
should maintenance and
programs to
reliability be involved.
increase
But
skilled
you
workforce.
mentioned the project
I
design
had no
business
idea
document, and we
the
do have
influence
a
factor was
business,
that
one of our
young.
major businesses actually has a design
It's kind of
standard
mind-boggling.
for their
People are so much
facilities.
smarter. I think
And
me
so
at
when we just
13
worked on these,
couldn't
the
compete
major
with a 13
expansion that we
now,
did,
that's for sure.
I had a chance to get
And the other
involved in
thing
that and actually
is
write
looking at
materials of
I think
construction
it is
standards
the
and other
contract
maintainability
relationships
standards
where
into that basis of design document.
it's one thing to
And
go out and
so
sign a lump sum
the great
turnkey
thing about that
contract.
is
And
when you
I
go for their
love
first cost
lump
estimate,
sum
which we call
turnkey
our 4.01
contracts because
estimate,
you almost want to
the
say, well,
design
you're done
requirements
Dustin,
are
but
already
the
there.
reality
So if
is
you've done
you're
materials of
not. You've
construction
chosen a
changes or
partner.
if you've added other
The
requirements,
contractor
it's
is
already
your
there. That's
operating
what
entity at that point. All you've done is transferred some value of risk in the form of liquidated damages, and they're operating the construction or the engineering or the fab site for you, and you're in bed together. I think we've got to come to a kind of a joint approach that if as owners we can't find resources, contractors probably can't either.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Can I think we only have 5 minutes left.
Go back to safety.
Well, I'm not going back to safety.
We could.
I just want to, I was talking to Ann earlier about digitalization, especially on, and we talked about how can the owner recognize the progress that the contractors have made in engineering, building, procuring the materials. If we don't have, that is, the owner does not have visualization, cannot see just what it is you're doing and relate to how that helps me as the owner. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, so one of the things we've been looking at is in our digital transformation as a company, right? What do you do with that information, right? Everybody's been operating as a company or as an industry moving towards digital for about 15 to 20 years. But we haven't really seen an improvement in productivity. We haven't seen an improvement in terms of the constructability, things like that. And we started looking and saying, well, why? What was the reason behind it? When you look, it's really that we're not leveraging that data, right? We're collecting a lot of information, but haven't figured out how to leverage it into those items. And I think that's where we are right now as an industry, where we can now take that information, right, that's now a digital engineering deliverable rather than just a piece of paper, and turning it into something where we talked about digital twins and where you can start moving that into operations and really changing that conversation about, you know, what is the end result, right? What is the real target? When we talk about partnering with our clients and things like that, we're really talking about when we turn it over, what do you want? What are your core values? What is going to make this a successful project for you, right? If we're going to go and build a plant where you want to do advanced analytics and predictive maintenance and things like that on the plant in the future, that means you need a lot of information and a lot of data handed over. You don't need a lot of pieces of paper. And so if we're moving that direction, then looking at the way the contracts are set up, where rather than getting credit for the number of paper deliverables that you're turning over at the end of the project, is it really the paper deliverable that you care about? Or is it actually the data behind that paper deliverable? Because that data is what's going to populate all of those databases and all those systems for operations to allow us to have those really advanced operating facilities. And so it's something that we're at now of trying to figure out how do we do that as an industry, how do we do that as a partnership between EPC and owners? Because if you're going to get credit for a paper deliverable, that's what's going to get handed
it
over.
comes down to transparency. Kerr, excuse me. Did you tell me 5 more minutes, or are we running out of time? Huh?
Couple more.
minutes, he said.
Couple more minutes. Do we
30
have time
more.
for any
So-
questions? Probably not.
Let me
Okay,
just
we'll let
build off what
Casey.
Ann was saying, because we're with you. One of the things that we're finding is we have to start at the beginning for data foundation.
Correct.
And CFOS, which is Capital Facility Information Handling Operating System, I think. So it's something that IOGP is sponsoring, and it's really meant to provide a basis for data and how you're formatting the data, because we've got to get aligned as an industry on how do we want to transmit this data, because otherwise every project will be different, and that isn't going to do any of us any good from an efficiency standpoint. So if we can all agree to the foundation of the data and the data format, then it can be put out there in some kind of a data lake, and then we can all just pull it for what we need. But that is going to, my experience in the last few years is that it's going to be difficult to build that foundation.
Yeah.
But
And as an EPC going into that digital space is now that if I'm going into engineering and I'm doing it all in a digital format, that now means I can start integrating with my vendors, with my fabricators, right, in a digital format. Imagine sending your steel design to a fabricator and having them feed it directly into a CNC machine.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
There is no handover, there is no
Right.
loss of information.
All right. Do we have time for any questions?
Not from the audience, no, I'm afraid.
The answer is no. Good.
I think, for me, a massive thank you to the panel and also from the audience as well, I imagine. Obviously, you had to deal with the kind of the sound issues, but I think it's a really, really good advert for the rest of the content that we have going on through the rest of the conference. You know, key issues around safety, around engineering design and development are going to be tackled in workshops this afternoon in construction innovation, in modularization, then at 3:30, construction innovations at 2. Equally, we're also dealing with the workforce development issue tomorrow at 2 p.m. And today at 2 p.m., we're also going to have a bit of a deep dive into the world of contracting and, you know, what lessons learned and how can we develop that in the future. So a really big thank you from me, and I hope you can join me in a round of applause for the panel for giving us such a good overview into all the sessions we're going to go through. Thank you.
Good job facilitating.
And we need somebody to fix the countdown clock.
Oh, yeah.